Not the big black screen.
All right. Nope.
Hang on. What's the view? There we go. Work? Yeah. It should go to you if you talk.
All right, so it is 5:30. We're gonna call this meeting to order with no public comments, I'm assuming. Oh, is there anybody public online that would like to comment before we introduce ourselves? Looks like we have no public comment. So I'm Danielle Doucette. I'm the Parks and Recreation representative here on the Catamount Community Forest Management Committee. Welcome. We've got new members and we would like to just introduce ourselves and go around. I would like to also belatedly thank Andrew Plum for his service on as the conservation planner for the town and with his committee. He left in December.
Yep.
But I feel like this has been a long time since we've had a meeting. We had a meeting in November.
Yeah.
And we've had just some pushbacks on dates and things. So thank you for rolling with my rescheduling. So I want to thank Andrew and then we can go around and introduce ourselves.
Cool. I'm Matt Belanger. I'm the planning director here, formerly Andrew's supervisor until he left us. I did get to go see him in Boston. I was walking by City Hall, so I texted him and said, "Do you really work in this building?" And he said, "Yes, I do, and I can come right down." And we took a picture and everything. So he's working for Boston City of Boston
really there
now. He's really there. He's loving it. And he's grateful for the experiences he got here in Williston, which was really nice to hear. He's one of the few people up there who's actually implemented policy before, like actually worked on developments and talked to applicants. So he's valuable there for the city and appreciates that. And for anybody who knows anybody who might be interested, we are hiring to fill his position. We're hiring for what we call a senior conservation planner, which is actually the level above where Andrew was at. Looking for someone around bachelor's in 2 with some GIS, geographic information system background, and or some planning experience. I think that's open for at least another week. So if you know anybody who wants a really kind of cool, interesting planning job that has some field work and this conservation bent, we are out there doing that. Anyway, I introed and then I took over to advertise the position, but it's to all of your benefit that someone more permanent gets here than me.
Hello, I just went around and do an introduction. Okay. Okay. Should we let's jump to Kim. If you're there, if this is a good time for you, Kim.
Hey folks, I'm Kim Coleman. I am joining you from Nanaimo, British Columbia, where I'm on Fulbright for the semester, but I normally am a Williston resident and a member of the Conservation Commission, and I'm the rep from the Conservation Commission to the Catamount Community Forest Committee. I'm also faculty at UVM and a colleague of
Thank you. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure.
All right.
I'm good at that. I know the answer.
Welcome.
My name is Jean Jensen. I'm a Williston resident. I'm on the Williston Select Board and I'm the representative to the committee from the Select.
And we have our new member.
Yes, I was on the newest face. My name is Drew Crandall. I'm a Williston resident as well and happen to be a new member of the team. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time at Catamount in various different capacities throughout my life. So I'm just happy to be here and see if I can contribute in any way I can.
Thank you.
John Atkinson, director of the Outdoor Family Center.
You look bigger than when you're on the screen.
I'm a medium guy.
My name is Amanda Preston. I'm a Johnson resident, but I am the operations and event manager for the Outdoor Center. So have a bachelor's in biology and 15 years of environmental education and recreational experience.
I'm Tony D'Amato. I'm also a Williston resident, but here representing the project happening that was initiated with Ethan Tapper and myself in terms of the research out there. Back when they were at UVM forestry program. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Very excited for your presentation coming up soon. We have another member on the committee, Hans, who will Probably. You see him online?
Yeah.
Oh, he's online. Okay.
But he's on mute.
I'm in your doorway. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Hold on.
Alan, you're just
That's your turn,
introducing
Alan.
yourself.
Yeah, I'm Alan Torte. I'm Vice President of the Board of Directors for the nonprofit Catamount Center.
We gotta do one more
All
chair.
right.
Here,
Yeah.
Hans, take this one and I'll
Driving the office is a little chillier than this.
Totally coming for a walk this morning, got in the house, you're like ripping off the layers.
Okay, and Hans, we've been going around doing introductions.
Yeah. Super. Is it my turn now?
Yeah.
My name's Hans Bueller. I've been on I've been a Williston resident since 2002. I've been on the Catamount Outdoor Family Center board since 2017. And on the CCF committee, attending as the CFC board president, probably since like the third meeting, back with Melinda. Through Simon, through Andrew, through Matt.
Right through me.
We're gonna get all the apostles in.
I helped Ethan put up the signs for the forestry project. I really miss Reed. I miss Terry too on the committee, but you know,
She's on there.
they're all involved. Yeah, so, and I volunteer Catamount quite a bit, probably like 80 hours of trail work, including invasive removals around the trails that I'm trying to clean up.
That's per year too,
Per year.
Yeah.
Per year. Yeah.
not total.
And then probably like another 20, 30 hours of spreadsheets and whatever with board.
At least.
I think you're underestimating.
But it's fun. I mean, I like it, right? Oh, and in my day job, I work at GE Healthcare as an operations manager.
Thank you.
It's nice to
Matt,
meet you.
it's great to have everybody introduce ourselves too. Here's our new member Hans here.
Nice to meet you.
Since everybody,
Yeah.
everybody else got to introduce themselves, Terry's online.
Oh, okay.
If she's wants to.
Terry, would you like to pop in and introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. So my name is Terry Marin. I'm a Williston resident, and I was a former member of the committee, and just here to hear Tony's presentation about the forest project.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's move to the approval of the minutes from November.
I move to approve the minutes of November, whenever the heck it was. 14th.
I had like 2 words that I wanted to change.
All right,
Yeah.
I can get them up for you.
Do we wanna second and then have discussion? Is that a second?
It's usually how that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So Jean moved and Kim seconded. Sorry, just trying to keep.
I was just down on 4.8 and I mean, this is under Kim's words, but I just felt like at the end of the sentence, instead of leaving it with, it says, Kim said the blue marks on trees and flags on the ground are what the forest looks like to them. I would just say to some visitors.
I'm fine with that. I just want it to capture the idea that the working landscape is what some people think of when they think of Vermont forests.
Okay.
Right. So. I guess all in favor to approve the minutes from November 14th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And-
Aye.
Okay, the motion minutes are passed.
Great.
And we are right on time. Oh, we're a minute on time, or we're on time for our discussion of forestry activities.
Right. Let's stop my share. So I'll just kick off to introduce Kim, who prepared a little bit of work on this to lead into Tony, and then we'll do questions to, I think, both of them after that, if that's okay.
Kim's presentation, Tony's
Okay.
presentation, question. Sounds good.
Mine's gonna be super quick. And I have this on the first. Oh, Matt, you have to enable me to share.
Yeah.
More.
You should have it now.
Okay.
If you don't, just request it and I'll greenlight it.
Yeah, I have to remember how. I think I got it. Now that I'm at a Teams campus and not a Zoom campus, I had to remember how this works. Okay, so I made this super fast, and so like apologies that it's a little on the academic side. I'm an academic. This like I'm sorry. Um and maybe to like make it worse, this is like what I cut my teeth on, and so I couldn't help put like some citations in here. Really the point that I want to make is that I think we should be thinking about the best ways to have effective collaborative forest governance. And we don't really have to like reinvent the wheel on this. It's something that has been written about a lot. These are just sort of like some of the foundational works that come up a lot, these two citations that I have up here. And like a note that like it's not weird that we're kind of struggling with communication and figuring out decision making and managing all the different players. It's super common that collaborative forest governance is complicated, but there's also like a lot of good work out there in peer-reviewed literature, but also in general technical reports and in like practical guidance that I think can help us think about how to do it really well. And there's a lot of examples in Vermont. So I just want to like put this out there that Vermont has like a really rich history of town forests. I have a master's student that is in like updating this and inventorying all the town forests around the state right now. And like the big takeaway is that these lands mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's sort of this constant pull for town forests to be many different things, right? To be woodlots, to be places where we do research, to have heavy recreation use. And it's not uncommon for there to be pulls in multiple directions that might sometimes seem like they conflict. And we're also, despite Catamount having a complex governance structure, really not alone in that. So there's like a whole range of governance structures that show up in Vermont town forests and then that show up in public land more broadly. If we look at examples from the National Park Service or US Forest Service, and just like I just put up here one example, Ashley Community Forest is that forest is owned by two towns. And so like the governance is a two-town structure. Like there's a lot of complex governance arrangements that I think we can look to for examples of how we sort of might make shared decisions and communicate more clearly and openly. And I just wanted to put a note out here today that I think we should really, sorry, one of my children is coming home from school. I think we should really think about clarifying our governance structures and consider creating a governance memo that would improve clarity around the different foci of work that happen at Catamount Community Forest, about decision making, about other processes. Think about ways to improve communications. And I think doing things like this will make it easier to talk about and consider things like longer lease agreements with the outdoor family center, for example. And I think in particular, I just want to put a bug in people's ear that like, I think a lot of the conversations that we've been having over the past few months that have been more difficult or that have been tense have potentially been a product of turnover. And this is super common in collaborative forest governance, that like these arrangements happen and they last for 10 plus years, and people inevitably turn over, right? Hans was just saying he's been here since Melinda, through Simon, through Andrew, and now to Matt, and they're going to hire a new conservation planner. So like it's inevitable that people are going to move on into new jobs, and that's the case in most collaborative forest governance arrangements. And so we can learn from those lessons as well. And then I think this would also be an opportunity for us to think about like the research projects that happen at Catamount, who's approving them, how we get updates, and just like a nod to the fact that This quote is from the management plan that Catamount has always been this valuable educational resource. And it specifically names UVM and like the intention to continue that. And so this is really just me just saying there's a lot of things happening at this forest. I think there's the potential for it to get increasingly complex. Maybe we can take all the documents that we already have and think about a governance memo that really clarifies like what the lines of communication are, what the work is that's supported, who makes decisions, what the process is for example, telling the outdoor family center if a research project is approved and what that's going to look like, et cetera.
Hey,
So,
Kim,
yeah.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Can you display your slides instead of the PowerPoint interface? I just tried to chat you. We're just seeing the first slide like it's in your PowerPoint menu.
Can you see me advancing?
Nope, we only saw the first one.
Dang. Okay, hang on. I'm gonna try one more time. Now, if I show you, can you see it moving?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Great.
Okay, so this was just
Thank
like
you. I'm so
town
sorry.
forests. There's a lot of them. There's lots of complex arrangements. And then like there's good work on turnover. This is something that I did, but there's other good work on turnover. And then this quote about like Catamount has a lot of stuff that we want to get out of it, right? It's a lot of things to a lot of people, and many of those are enumerated in the management plan. And like an educational resource and being a place for research, specifically UVM is called out among other things. I think we should like think about how to improve governance and communication. That's my pitch.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna just jump on that. I think that we're having this, inviting people in as well, because we want to learn more about what's happening in our specific forest that we have going on, with recognizing that there has been a lot of turnover within the committee, on the committee and the staffing, that it's important. And there's people doing things in the forest that would like to learn about and appreciate the work that they're doing. So you're the first of a few different groups that we'd like to welcome to learn about what's going on.
Can I ask a question? The Outdoor Family Center had a list of questions from the board that were submitted, and Kim made a good point. Like a lot of those are just for the town, not for Tony. And I agree, Kim, with everything you said, and I appreciate that presentation on considering the governance and communication. Was there any documented existing governance plan, or maybe we're just realizing there wasn't, and that's where we need to build one? Like, what was the existing? Like, that was the nature of a lot of the questions.
So
about like, how are things supposed to be working?
well, ultimately, the license agreement is a contract between the town and the family center, which explains that relationship and provides some guidance as to how that relationship should be conducted. Then the management plan and also the boundaries that were established by the conditions of the various pockets of funding that were used for the town's purchase of the land also create some boundaries around how the property is to be managed. So what may be missing, and what both Andrew and Simon worked on, was first off, just writing the document that pulls all those different influences together and says, these are the boundaries that all of the terms of our funding, the fact of being a town that owns this thing, and some of the constraints we live under, and then the rights that are conveyed to the family center under the license agreement. There's a couple of draft flow charts out there that start to try to capture all of that. But I think what you're talking about is, once we all collectively understand what those boundaries are, what's the governance structure or the relationship that's created inside of that? And I think to that extent, as far as it's gone is, we're gonna have a committee. And here we are. I don't think there's been anything more formal than that. established.
I would agree with that. And I would say, like, I think I sent Matt a couple examples of like governance memos from other forests. I may have also sent one to some of the Catamount folks that are here, just as like to say I'm going to share this. And I guess that's my suggestion is I think we should work on something like that. Hans, I don't know that it exists in the way that I agree with everything Matt just said, and I think it would make things smoother if something like that exists. So I'm sort of pitching that idea to the committee to consider.
And it would, like, the thing that, I mean, again, I've been on this CCF committee in one capacity or another. Now I'm an official, committee member, but the thing that I never realized all those, and I read the forest management plan, I read every one of those documents like multiple times before the forest was purchased, when Ethan presented it, like there's other things I didn't quite realize either. But when you, Kim, were saying like, oh, well, the conservation committee decided that would happen at Catamount. That was the first time in my mind I ever thought, oh, I didn't know the conservation committee of Williston was making decisions for what happened at Catamount. That was just sort of like a new idea for me. Like, oh, wow, there's multiple committees, even within the town of Williston, that are like planning what to have happen at Catamount. So I think the governance would explain some of that too. And that was the nature of some of our questions in the prior CCF meeting, like, oh, wait, does the conservation committee decide this type of thing? And then is it communicated to the CCF committee? And that would be great.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think Williston Conservation Commission may have made that decision before this committee was formed. But yes, I agree with you. Like, I think that like all of those things could be spelled out and then it would just eliminate heartache or some heartache.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Have those questions, you have those questions, or have those questions been sent to Tony already? We'll get to those
I
questions.
don't know if they have, and I can probably bring up the email if you give me a minute.
Sure.
I sent Tony the questions that were relevant to him. So I'll let him say if he's prepared to talk about them.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, Tony, would you like to present to us?
Yeah,
what's
does
going
it
on
make
there?
sense to throw the presentation on your machine or
If you want to, we can do that for sure.
what's the best way to organize talk and not look at the presentation? Yeah, what do you?
Where is it right now?
It's on external, but it also have on my laptop.
If you have a jump drive,
Yeah.
We'll find a way.
We got 4 laptops, let's go. Another
We
one
got
here.
There's a whole thing.
Bring my husband.
You should take notes too. I'm using a pen.
I can move over and let you drive and take it without sharing.
Yeah, rather than undocking the laptop, I just roll over again.
It's a tablet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
Well, I feel like Hans, you mentioned Ethan, that was another person, that's another rollover of a position, so we've had,
Brandon online, our new forester. Is he joining us today?
I
Is that
think
his name, Brandon?
Brandon Benedict,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's out of.
Yeah.
I don't see him on there. I think we're inviting him in the future.
Oh,
All right.
No,
I guess he can watch the recording of this. We're being recorded.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, it seems like it's the classic sort of silo thing. You have different groups operating and that governance memo would help kind of understand how each group is operating without,
Storing in somebody's head.
like without getting in each other's way, yet also knowing, what each group is doing, between the outdoor center, between research, between the guy who does the hay,
Once we do
you know,
this.
town forest.
Yeah, and because I'll just say one last thing, because for a long time I studied a program called the Collaborative Forest Management. I can never remember it. CFLRP, Collaborative Landscape Forest Restoration Act, something like that. This congressional program that funded 30-something projects around the country. I have a lot of examples of these like governance memos or governance documents. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Great.
So we're gonna give you some time, Kim, the next few months on our agenda to lead this discussion for us.
Perfect.
I was gonna say, I was really looking forward to 8 months of wordsmithing a governance thing, so I'm kind of disappointed, but
Yeah,
okay.
maybe you can whittle it down.
We can use, at work, we use AI to do all sorts of stuff. We just upload her governance documents, say, make this work for Catamount. It'll spit it right out. for us.
All right, folks at home, can you see the presentation?
They should be seeing what you see on that.
Okay, all right.
That computer is attending the meeting like someone at home and then
Okay.
Fabulous.
projecting it to you. So you should be seeing what they're seeing.
Okay, Tony, so we're
All
gonna
right.
listen to your presentation and save
Yeah.
our questions for the end.
So I think it was a good discussion, because Melinda and Ethan are my connections to Catamount and kind of the silo that I guess I enter into the equation with. And so even though I'm a Williston resident, really my focus is more broadly, Vermont, globally, thinking about forest conservation and stewardship, and certainly in a changing environment. And so the work that we're doing at Catamount, I'll certainly drill in on that in a second, but I'll just kind of provide a couple slides just for context for just what we're doing, even a little bit around thinking about forest stewardship and what that looks like in the year 2025, because I realize cut stumps are rot if they're in your backyard, and so like why are those there, and what's the motivation behind that, and kind of how do we think about things. And again, those that are disciples of Ethan have heard elements of this before, but I think it's just worth reminding folks that we weren't out there trying to maximize wood yield. And so I think it's always kind of interesting. Kimberly was talking a bit about shared governance and kind of bringing together different perspectives. And when we think about forest management and forest stewardship in general, there's really been a radical change in kind of how we think about that. Certainly how we train students at UVM, how we think about our relationship with the forest writ large. And I really like this cartoon because it kind of dates when I got my degree in forestry, which is in 2000. And so the upper part is kind of often the caricature I think that still exists for what forestry is all about, which is like simplifying an ecosystem to like maximize wood production for our use. There's kind of, and you kind of see that brought up a lot. Like if you're cutting trees, you're obviously out there as like a 1850s timber baron to maximize like your revenue and kind of exploit the land. But really, a lot of what we emphasize today is like taking what's been simplified and trying to actually make it more complex and try to restore some of that variability, both in terms of composition and structure. And so you hung the signs up at Catamount, kind of the narrative around doing that. But I think in general, I recognize that there's just when people see trees cut and they see a logger out there, there's I think inherently a negative reaction to that. But actually the intent behind a lot of management we do now is to try to diversify conditions for diverse values and diverse outputs. But as we all appreciate, really we're in a pretty novel scenario right now. I hate to even say that it's been great to have like 2 weeks of normal winter, because who knows what next week brings. But the lower left-hand corner is what the Northeast Kingdom looked like last January. And so we know that things are changing radically. And so a lot of what we think about in terms of forest stewardship, our understanding of how forests work, really is based on an understanding of like the last 100 years. And so as things are radically changing and evolving, there's a real concern about how that will affect forests, but also how do we sustain values into the future. So I thought you all might be interested kind of on how this resonates with the forest management community. And so this is a survey we did of over 330 foresters, both rural and urban foresters, and kind of asked them like what their biggest concerns were about climate change. And it was kind of nice walking in the door and seeing like a flyer for insect pests. So it's on everybody's minds here. But both rural foresters and urban foresters they're most concerned about insect and disease impacts. Used to just be emerald ash borer, and now we have beech leaf disease. Who knows, when hemlock woolly delegate, all these things are going to affect our forests. So a lot of concern over that. Certainly snowpack, you all might be concerned about it for recreational purposes, but if you blog or
We don't like ticks either.
yeah, you don't like ticks, or if you're a tree that has roots that get really damaged by deep freeze, a real concern. Invasive plants and the vegetation competition variable there. And what's also interesting, if you differentiate between the dark green and the light blue, urban foresters are often more concerned about things that directly impact like trees' health, because they're thinking about boulevard trees or trees out in parks. And so like heat stress and those factors are more critical. But writ large, people are worried forests are changing, etc.
What's her?
Herbivory is a deer. deer
Okay.
or moose, yeah, so, yeah, great question. And so regeneration, I think people are often concerned, are we getting enough new trees back? And part of that's tied to deer, and part of that's sometimes tied to buckthorn or other invasives. So,
They seem to be worried about everything.
yeah.
Right? This
They
survey
don't-
tells
they
us
don't
they're worried
sleep-
about
They
everything.
don't sleep well, which I think also shows, as a community, you know, relative to maybe some other, land stewardship communities, they're pretty, like, they're on board with things are changing, like we get, and they, you know, you can't ignore or deny, what's happening, certainly in the Northeast, community of foresters. So, there's been a lot of calls, globally, but even, regionally, you know, with these changes, like we need to be adapting our behavior, and of course, we are doing that as well as like in our day-to-day life, but, with Western wildfire, people talk a lot about how do we minimize, you know, future impacts like this, and in the Northeast, there's been a lot of questions around fire. Thankfully, it's not something we need to worry that much about, in our forest, but the other things like invasive insects and diseases, drought, et cetera, people are wondering, like, should I be doing something to adapt and respond to that change? And so, as I mentioned, like most of our forest management, even most of our understanding of natural history is based on like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. There's no like guidebook on like how do I manage for Vermont's forest in the year 2050? Like, just, you know, we don't know, and we don't have those examples. And so, beginning in 2016, starting in northern New Hampshire, but really working throughout Vermont, New Hampshire, and we have a site out in New York. This is where Catamount Community Forest comes in. We started establishing these experimental sites that really are testing different strategies to adapt to change, but also looking at other outcomes in terms of carbon and biodiversity, and trying to understand if we are to try to manage adaptively for change, you know, what does that look like on the ground? And then as we monitor that, do we see certain things possibly having more or less promise in terms of sustaining certain tree species or sustaining certain values? And so most of these sites are quite large. And so Catamount actually is the smallest site we're working at. Most of these places are, you know, 300, 400 acre kind of large scale experiments. And all of them have gone through what we call this co-production process. And so in the case of Catamount, it was Melinda and Ethan kind of working with us and talking through, these are the threats to this forest. How might you kind of manage that forest into the future to sustain those values? And so again, I think to Kimberly's conversation, you know, like probably would have made sense maybe to have a broader group involved, but that was a silo that we were operating in when we designed things. So to that end, the timeline, the project history. So we were doing these experiments. We were kind of working with the state and others and talking about, you know, we're looking for places for additional experimental sites. Ethan said, hey, like it'd be great to do this at Catamount Community Forest. And so in 2020, we met with Ethan and Melinda, kind of talked through what that might look like. And then also developed a similar plan. I'll show the map in a second. For Talcott Woods, which is a university research forest that abuts the Catamount Outdoor Center. And then in the year 2020, despite COVID, thankfully forestry, we social distance. We've been doing that for a long time. We were able to go out and establish those plots that are out there, as well as get pre-treatment bird data, pre-treatment vegetation data, and carbon data. And then it was several years before anybody saw any activity out there, and the harvesting occurred in 2023. And then in 2024, obviously, they're all aware that we planted trees out there, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. So just to remind folks, if you're unaware of it, there is a small component of this also happening on UVM's land. So those that haven't ever been there, some people probably been there. We always allowed access from those that want to recreate beyond the boundaries, even though it isn't part of Catamount.
You are.
Well, it seems to have always occurred. You know, we're fine with people. People always go through there. There's a trail that's kind of become a de facto extension of, I think, some of the activities in Catamount. But the way that we set things up was there are a couple areas on Catamount that you're aware of that had treatments, so they actually were harvested, but there's also areas where no harvesting is occurring, which is always important to have to kind of see how like unmanaged areas change. And then, of course, we collected data before any treatments occurred, any harvesting occurred, which allowed us just to monitor, like, all right, well, we know this bird was here or wasn't, and then now is it here or not going forward. So obviously, most of the questions dealt with the colorful flagging out in the sites. And so one of the things that's really become quite commonly discussed, which is hasn't been popular in Vermont since the 1920s and 30s when we were planting Norway spruce and Scots pine and all these goofy plantations. Is that we don't really plant in the Northeast because we naturally get back, a lot of the trees we are excited about, sugar maple, spruce, birch, aspen in that one harvest area at Catamount already. But, as we think about global change and the rate of change, there's been a lot of discussion around, should we be planting trees, in response to this change, both to possibly enhance, benefits like carbon sequestration and storage, but also possibly to adapt to shifting ranges of species. So what I've just pulled up here on the left is kind of a ranking of like future capability for different tree species. And this is a projection for Northwest Vermont coming from a tool called the Climate Change Tree Atlas. It's a awesome long-term federally funded tool that really, based on different climate scenarios, will project like how certain species might do into the future. And so I just pulled some most common species found in Northwest Vermont. So sugar maple, red maple, all the way down to black ash and tamarack. And you'll notice there's a few like red maple, red oak expected to do really well in the future, and then some others that maybe not so great, and others actually pretty poor. And really what that's based on is kind of an understanding of those species, their ability to cope with different climatic changes, but also other things like known insects, disease outbreaks, etc. And so when you're in an area like Catamount Community Forest, it's got a lot of eastern hemlock, or might have areas with ash in it. There's concern like, well, what happens if that does start to experience a lot of mortality? Will that still have similar values? At the same time, there's also tools tied to this that allow you to look at, well, what's the likelihood? We know that trees have migrated historically, so climate's changing. Can they kind of track that change into the future? Because on the bottom right, I have a map that's, again, I don't get any royalties for plugging the Tree Atlas, but another output of that awesome tool, the Tree Atlas. And I've chosen chestnut oak because it's one of the species we planted at Catamount Community Forest. And so all the pink areas are where chestnut oak currently already exists. And then the areas in light blue in Vermont, basically what that indicates is that the habitat quality in the future, so basically like the future conditions there might actually be pretty good, but the likelihood of chestnut oak being able to get there is low. Right, because the rate of climate change is at a rate, it's just way faster than things had migrated before. Whereas, in other areas that you might see kind of darker blue, like southwestern Vermont, where there already is some chestnut oak nearby, it's likely to get there. It can move, it can track climate at that rate.
Chestnut oak's not on your list.
No, it's not in Northwest Vermont yet.
Oh, I see. So that's just the things that
That
are
are currently here.
Northwest
Yeah,
Vermont,
exactly.
but not like other trees that might do well.
Exactly. Yep.
Is it different?
Exactly.
And Tony, with future capability, like, is that, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years? Any time frame?
So typically they're looking at a 50 to 100-year time frame. What's been a little bit unnerving is that some of the changes are just happening a little bit faster than expected. I think we all are maybe even experiencing that with our summers, and winters. I mean, it's just been, I think some of the projections, we'll see where we go. But usually by year 50s, we're seeing pretty significant shifts. And part of it is we're getting wetter, but we're also getting warmer. And so even though like we're getting a lot of rain, like once we start getting more evaporative demand, it still gets pretty droughty, based on the climate models, which are a lot of uncertainty, but that's kind of the general sense. So what we often are doing then is kind of looking at, all right, things are going to be impacted. We might lose certain species, or they might not do as well. And so if we're going to plant some trees for future change, like what do we use to select, what are criteria? And so like one of the first things we want to look at is, if we're going to lose a species, are there other species that serve a similar ecological function that we can kind of, either increase the representation of in that ecosystem or introduce that ecosystem to kind of buffer and create some redundancy there. So a good example is, if I'm going to lose eastern hemlock, are there other tree species that serve a similar function? Sadly, not great, but like red spruce or, might be a somewhat similar surrogate. Likewise, American beech with beech leaf disease, there's a lot of concern we're going to lose that like mass producing tree from our forest. Can we plant other trees that produce mass that might be important for bear, et cetera?
And eastern hemlock, by way of example, like what does it function that we're looking to replace that function with a different tree?
Yeah, great question. So, large, deep crown conifer, so it still retains its lower branches for things like, black-footed green warblers, northern flying squirrels, creates deep shade. So
I
like,
see.
think about,
So you're talking about habitat for animals,
Yeah.
that's the primary function you're concerned with, the nature of
and
that.
litter quality, influence on mycorrhizal community. So it can be a range of things. Food, even like water, water uptake, depending on where you're working. So that's one lens.
Yeah.
Other lens is cultural values. So obviously, most of our tree species have, deep significance to indigenous communities in the region. And so there's really no replacement for those tree species, but in some cases, like black ash, working with some of the tribal communities in Maine, they're looking at white oak or box elder or cedar as at least alternate materials for making that. So trying to have some redundancy in those values. And importantly, making sure the species is future adapted to climate. So I'm probably not going to advocate for like planting boreal trees in Vermont. There's a pretty good likelihood they're going to be stressed.
No palm trees?
No palm trees, and the same deal. Yeah, I'm not going to go for shortleaf pine or long. Yeah, go south. So we planted 8 species at Catamount, so 946 total seedlings. They've seen them lower they're planted, but specifically in those larger openings created in the experiment. And they represent 2 flavors of what we call like forest assisted migration, which is kind of a kind of broader term for like moving trees around, but there's different flavors to it. And so one approach, so that the diagram on the right shows like if I'm going to move a species currently within its range, but maybe move like a southern genotype further north. So I grab red oak from Massachusetts and plant it, in central Vermont. So it's the same species, but genetically might be better adapted to warmer conditions. So we call it assisted population migration. We're not like moving it beyond its current range, but we might be moving, some different genetic populations to do what we call assisted gene flow. The other flavor is where we actually move a species beyond its range to where we think it would get if it could just sprint as fast as climate is changing. So that chestnut oak example is an example of what we call assisted range expansion. We're actually moving a tree to where it might get to if like literally it could track climate, which they just can't. They're slow moving. So the species we planted, a couple of those are range expansion. So things like American chestnut, shagbark hickory, and chestnut oak, and then the remainder are kind of what we call assisted population migration. And so the red spruce that's out at Catamount, just like me being an import from Massachusetts to Williston, that also is from north central Massachusetts. Likewise, the red oak, we actually have multiple sources of red oak from both Massachusetts, southern Vermont, as well as central Vermont, kind of seeing how the different populations do out there. And then the remainder are just from kind of local or central central Vermont sources. And so what that allows us to do is kind of track both like how species are doing, but also like different genetic variations within a species, assuming that those southern varieties might have more.
Or are they all new to Catamount? Because there's a lot of hemlock out there.
Yeah,
that we cut down too.
Yeah, so hemlock's not new. So yeah, it's been planted.
So it's surprising me that we cut hemlock down and you replanted hemlock.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I would assume that would have seeded itself just fine.
Hopefully, yeah, it's a species that, likes like disturbed soil. So given most of the harvesting was done without snow on the ground, it probably will do okay. But
Okay.
yeah, hemlock can be
And are any of the others ones that were already out
white
there?
pine and red oak. Yeah.
White pine, red oak, they're already out there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so it can be useful as well to sometimes compare how the natural
I'm glad you didn't plant any
populations.
beech, that stuff's terrible.
No, although, beech, I feel the same way with beech leaf disease. If we lose beech, that's gonna that one, it doesn't look good. If that,
Oh,
if that,
really?
yeah, it's
Generally speaking, beach isn't doing well in
Really?
Vermont.
yeah, yeah.
And between-
Yeah, don't you
between
feel
the-
bad that you
Yeah.
were
I know.
It's-
putting on the poor tree?
It's yeah.
I do feel
Pretty,
bad.
pretty
tell.
critical food source for our black bear, but yeah, it's a nuisance if you want something else to grow there. Yeah, so yeah, we didn't plant beech.
But could you just briefly address the American chestnut, which
Yeah,
we all know chestnuts were,
Yeah.
devastated.
So
what's the story of that?
those are from the American Chestnut Foundation. So they're a hybrid. They call it the B3F3 hybrid. So it's kind of in a series of back crosses between the American chestnut and the Chinese chestnut, which is resistant. So these chestnut, we got them out there before we had to pay a tariff on the 4% 4% Chinese. But yeah, so they're 90. I think they're 90 4% American chestnut at this point.
Well,
They are not, they are tolerant, but not truly resistant to the blight, so, you know, they can, some of them tend to survive a little bit longer than a native chestnut. But yeah, so there's a lot of places people are trying them out and testing them out, and so those are planted out there, but they're from, so Gary Hawley, another name from, Williston, Conservation Commission, and a colleague of mine as well. He's worked a lot with the American Chestnut Foundation, so there's already some other chestnut plantings in Williston, and so the issue with that American chestnut, just from a future climate adaptation standpoint, is the parent trees are from Virginia. Because if there's a couple of resistant trees down there that they cross the, so they do well, and then they experience a winter like this. And especially there's not snowpack, they get a lot of kind of dieback, so. Yeah.
that happens to a lot of things that transfer here from Virginia.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and I think that, there was some work that they were gonna do more of like a genetically modified chestnut, and that, has been abandoned, so right now it's all just through breeding programs. So if some of these do survive, they then try to collect nuts or pollen from them and use them.
It's gonna be a fascinating thing to see how those do.
Yeah, as a tree species, in terms of function, it's unique in that it grows fast, but it's got really dense wood. And so from a carbon sequestration standpoint, it is a pretty unique beast. It's really, has a lot of potential and definitely important culturally.
Is a seedling like this or like that, or?
It sprouts fast, yeah, so, it'll grow really quickly, out there, so that'll probably be some of the bigger trees this upcoming year will be the American chestnut, that survive, they really get going fast. Oh, yeah, so all the seedlings are small that we're planting, yeah. So, always a question, like, and an exclamation, you know, what's going on out there? And so a couple things, just, this is out in Corinth, one of our sites, but similar to, we all seen what's happening, what are you seeing? So, as most of you already know, the different colored flagging, so each color is a different species, or sometimes a different genotype within a species. So it could be like the red oak from Massachusetts versus the red oak from Vermont. And then we cage half the seedlings to protect them from deer. You might notice the picture in the foreground, that's an American chestnut. Sometimes we're sowing those as nuts, and those are like putting a candy bar out in the wood. It's like a small mammal wants to eat those, so they're a little bit more fortified to protect from things digging them up. So I'll mention it in a second in terms of the project timeline, but the tree cages, we often take off after 3 years, you know, things start growing through them. And then depending on the level of deer browse pressure, you know, once the trees get to be a certain height, it's not an issue. The flagging, you know, for us, that allows us to kind of track individual trees, find them, particularly if we're trying to figure out if something was like something died. If there isn't a flag there, like we aren't always sure, like, was there a seedling here or not? And so it's really helpful because there's a lot of attrition early on. And then this is like ground zero planting. Within like 3 years, that is a mess of raspberry. It's hard to see, like, you're not going to see those. So it's hard to find them without some monumenting. So in terms of the timeline, and I'm happy we can certainly talk about the flags and all that. So forests change slowly, so we don't measure everything every year because that'd be a lot of work for something that changes on a slow timeline. But this summer, we will be going back out to remeasure the plots that are established out there for vegetation, forest carbon, and bird communities, and then likely again in 2029 and kind of on a 5-year cycle after that. The one thing we do measure annually, because it does change so fast, and because, like I said, there can be a lot of attrition early on, is tree seedlings. So we go out there and just measure each seedling. We do tag everyone. And then for the first few seasons, I'm not sure if we'll do it this year. It depends really on how much the competition grows back. We do weed around half of those seedlings, so we can see like what the influences of competition on half of them. That weeding is typically done with brush saws. We can talk about, you know, whether people want us to do it other ways, but it's pretty quick. We just go and basically remove vegetation 3 feet around half of the seedlings. And then probably will end that in depending on things that go. And then, like I said, in 2028, that's when we would also take like all the things that are protecting individual trees off of them. Those tree tubes, those that have used those before, they say they photo degrade. I think that's only if they're like on the top of a building in direct sunlight. They never photo degrade, and so once trees start growing through them, it's more of a, I think, of a hindrance than a positive in terms of protecting them from deer browse. So that's kind of the timeline. So I can stop and certainly happy to answer questions, but I guess just kind of taking a step back and the conversation today, like I mentioned, you know, Ethan was really excited for us to work there, and we've always kind of worked with Ethan as like our point of contact, and obviously that's no longer a point of contact, and also, like I said, Melinda was who we were working with initially too, and so I'm always open and happy to talk about how to best communicate things, but I think some of the miscommunication or what around this summer was, I think that a vacuum occurred, and we kind of were like, all right, like, oh, is it okay to go out there? Then yeah, I'd go out there, and that's kind of, you know, where I think some things came to a head. So happy to move forward in any direction that makes sense, but that's a little bit more context. And I'm always happy, you know, to share what we're finding, certainly. So if that could, I think in terms of the governance and research, other partners we work with, that's often like part of the MOU and the agreement is that, you know, we're providing updates and reports, and you don't need reports unless you're insomniacs. But, you know, I think in terms of yeah, I'm happy to always provide a yearly update, whatever makes sense to the group. So.
Do you have, I imagine you do, some like, I mean, you presented us a summary here, and this might be adequate, but is there like a document that defines the entire research project?
Yeah.
It might get kind of scientific, but it would be like, here's where we plant the trees, or here's where we do this work, and then in this year we do that work. Like, you've summarized it for us here. But I don't think I've ever seen a document like that we had like in a forest management plan. I read that like back before any of this work happened. I'm like, oh, cool, they're gonna research some stuff.
Yeah.
Right, that's as far as I understood. They're gonna, that's nice, go do some research. But like, it wasn't clear in terms, and which is why in the last meeting, you'll see in the meeting notes, it says Hans will ask, you know, well, can we remove the flags? Like, that's being asked in the context of a vacuum of information.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the flags are for. Was there a plan for them to be there for a certain duration? If so, my expectations are set, and I won't ask that question. But like, in absence of having seen anything like that, it was all like, wait, what is going on out here? So I think I'm still not sure, maybe it was one of the questions that Kim forwarded on to you. Like, if we read that whole research document, like, is there chapter 2 and we're like in chapter 1 and like a bunch of new stuff's gonna start
No.
happening out there?
Yeah, we don't have any. So
Like,
we,
that was
we're
just
kind of
just the uncertainty
Yeah.
of like, wait, what is the scope of this? And and I guess specific, because the flags are kind of the visible thing. Do the flags stay beyond 28, or do they come out in
Yeah, you
28?
probably won't be seeing those flags by 2029. I mean, just in terms of regrowth.
But do they stay in, or do they come
Yeah,
out?
they stay in. So here's
Indefinitely.
yeah, so this is like that's a flag in an area that we've been weeding. That's a chestnut, actually, in northern New Hampshire. That's 3 years of growth in that site. So if we didn't so this is 1 year of growth in the site that we've been weeding. So pretty quickly. So that's like ground zero, what you saw this summer. So it's gonna be engulfed in vegetation. So for us, it's really helpful to have those flags, both for monumenting,
Yeah.
but and tracking.
I mean, I'm not like pressuring you
Yeah.
to take them out. I'm just trying to understand, right? And if I had read this like document that explains, and I don't know, I don't even know if the document would say that. Like, if I read your research plan, would it give you those, you know?
Yeah, it would have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think,
So that's right.
again, when we work with like other partners, we're asked to kind of, so again, like for like
Uh-huh.
governance going forward, like we're asked to submit. You know, will there be any permanent marking out there? Will it be X, Y, and Z? You know, so we provide that, and so as part of that, what will be, like, because, again, I guess I direct our research forests. Like, we have research trash I would just call it that, from like 30 years ago, somebody did an experiment, there was never like an agreement to come back and remove those drift nets that are gonna divert salamanders, you know, so I think there's, I think it'd be good, I mean, we do that just from, I guess, because I know what it's like to be left with that type of stuff, but for, yeah, the governance around research, it'd be good to like, you need to have a research plan tied to this, you know, and kind of spells these things out, so. In the state of Vermont, like when we work on state lands, you know, there are kind of things we have to go through and kind of delineate and so forth, but I think. For us, it was very much like talking to Ethan and, yep, go out there, do what you need to do, and we kind of did it, but I think. Not recognizing, I think, the broader perspective on like how that should flow.
And not to belabor it, but just for seeking understanding, I'm understanding these flags stay in the ground indefinitely. And if 10 years from now, somebody said, hey, I'd like to go out as a volunteer and pull these out to get the trash out of the woods, or would that be advised, or nobody, like, we want to accommodate and set expectations appropriately, like, if you tell us now, nobody should ever remove them, even if it's 50 years from now, because they'll be of some use. I guess we'd say, sure, that's fine.
We'd pull them once, 50 years, once there'd be some pretty big, well, I don't know, about 50 years, but I think usually we wait, once the trees get to be like a good size, we're pulling them out, like, you know, even to us, like a small, you know, sapling size, and it's pretty darn easy to like differentiate them, so, yeah.
Can I jump in and thank you for this
Yeah.
presentation?
Yeah.
That was, like, I feel
Great.
like you have taught us what we need to ask other people, and also just has taught us a lot about what's happening out there right now. Are there any parts that are, of this part that are protected for the deer graze?
Yeah, just the seedlings themselves.
In their little-
The exclosures out there, I'm not sure, I'm not involved with that, that work, but, and so it's I mean, most of the places we've worked, actually, we work a lot, you know, like the Northeast Kingdom, snowshoe hare, real decent sun, spruce and things, in northern New Hampshire, it's like moose. So sometimes we, you know, the deer, so it'd be interesting to see like if the deer browse effect is deer or not. It hasn't been as important for seedling survival relative to like the tree that aren't being competed with tend to be better than you'd expect, so.
Honey, what do you do if you have if a lot of these trees aren't successful? In 5 years from now, and you've got, 5% of them are successful, is that?
So we pull flags when trees die, I guess that's one thing, because,
Yeah.
but we let it go, because that's part of, I mean, I don't lose my job if trees die, so it's useful for, that's good data, so a lot of what we've shown is it's tough to get it, and I think one of our biggest challenges in our region is we don't have local nurseries that I can get seedlings from, oftentimes they're being shipped from all places and.
So we say let it go, you just let the trees
Yeah.
reseed naturally.
Yeah, so we only, you know, I mean, a huge part of this is naturally coming back, and so we have plots that are just monitoring that, you know, natural regrowth. And so, I mean, if trees are dying out there, those survival rates are really helpful for us to understand. And I think, you know, part of it too is the goal really is not to replant like a future forest. If like 5% of these trees survive 50 years, when it's really shifted, having that seed source now here provides just another opportunity, like a different adaptation pathway than would have been present if we had to put that tree there. And so it's less about, because we don't know, and so we're not going to re-engineer like the future forest. It's more, can we add in some additional like functions and responses that wouldn't be there if we didn't plant.
So at what point do we start worrying about all the invasives that are growing through your research plot?
So yeah, we'll be weeding those, but we won't, I mean, that could be a discussion if people feel like we become the source population.
Right.
Then I think that's a good conversation to have. I think for us, most of what we would do initially is just keeping them off of half the seedlings so we can kind of see like what is the influence of those invasives on these planted trees. And so that's kind of what we do. We do like what we call split block design. So half the trees get no invasives and have to, and so then we can really tease out like is it invasives or not. But I think that could be a discussion, because that, I mean, we don't want, yeah, this to be creating bigger issues to the forest. So yeah, if there's something there.
That's
that's-
kind of happens when you clear something out, right? They'll
Yeah,
come back with
they can-
buckthorn, so.
Yeah.
Do you have questions for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just because it was often through Ethan and, Brendan, the great forester, but different personality,
And job description.
Yeah, job description, yeah, just thinking through like going forward, whether it's events or other things that, I'm always happy to help with that, or even to your point, we have like 2-pagers we use, we do a lot of field tours at our other sites that are part of this experiment that kind of summarize things and talk about like what the flags mean and what they're seeing. So, I think, yeah, for me, yeah, what's a useful level of like, I live in this town, but irrespective of that, I mean, I go to Brunswick, Vermont a lot, as well. I mean, it's just part of, that's what I do. But yeah, for you all, like, what's a helpful level of communication, engagement, like, community outreach that, because I'm happy to do that, and I believe in doing that, but yeah, I don't want to also like create events that then like are conflicting with other plans for the Catamount, et cetera, so.
Yeah, Ethan really liked to do events, and they were sort of done under the town, and I don't think he got his own COI. Any outside group that does events at Catamount, the town wants to get a certificate of insurance.
That's easy for, yeah.
And if you wanted to do an outside event, like that's just the process I think you go through, or I'm not clear.
Well, I
before
think
Ethan
that the
went
committee
under
would
the
like to
town.
continue doing out some
Yeah.
walks and having your
Yeah.
events.
I-
Regardless of Ethan's
Yeah.
involvement now,
Mhm.
but. And would that connection would be with the town's
I think
staff?
so.
So, one of the challenges in this collective, this relationship around this piece of land has been managing the organization of volunteer activities, events, and family center activities and events, and management activities together. And a lot of the challenges have been just down to communication.
Yeah.
And, just ensuring that there's not conflicts between those things, or miscommunication very rapidly resulting in hurt feelings, bad conflicts, arguments, et cetera. And, that's pretty solvable by just having everybody talk to each other, and being clear what's going on. But I think in the context of where we started tonight with Kim talking about governance and, sort of drawing up a charter. Well, we have a charter, but drawing up a compact or an agreement that says, okay, we all understand these are the terms that we all have to live under. We have a town-owned piece of land. We have a family center that's licensed to manage and use it and control some of the ways in which it's accessed and maintained. We have other parties that are coming in, basically under the umbrella of the town sometimes, or fulfilling management requirements that the town has because of how the town attained the funding to purchase the property. And what we need to work towards is, I think the first model was, well, how are we going to manage communication? Well, we're going to have a committee. Great. But let's write down how we're actually going to manage communication. And we've done a little bit of that. So we have the collective spreadsheet for family center events. We had a conversation early in Andrew's tenure at this job about how we were going to handle communication about town events and the presence of town volunteers on the land and maintain that. And there's more to be done there, and it needs to all kind of be brought into something that I think encompasses a lot of these eventualities. Hey, there's going to be a group of students out there doing work today. They need access to this part of the land. They need to bring materials out with them today, or today they don't need to bring materials.
Not today, in a few weeks from now.
Well, that's the hope,
Right?
right? Is the other thing that makes this all work way better is when we get out ahead of it, and when we're talking as far out ahead as we can. So our hope is that the staffing component of this can be a conduit for all of that, me for now and whoever I hire, hopefully soon.
If you
And
know anybody,
yeah, if you know anybody, make that pitch again. It's, the application's open right now and it's a really unique, planning position that gets to do things that most planners don't get to do.
Defensive against the dark arts teacher.
Just tell people, we used to, I started off as an environmental studies 101 student in my freshman year in college, and we all went around the room and said what we wanted to do, and we all said we wanted to work outside, and then the professor laughed at us for about half an hour. And said that's not what people who do what you do usually get to do. It's usually office work, and this is the one planning position we actually have in the office that gets to go outside a little bit and get their hands dirty, which is really seriously, it's a cool position. But once we get that, I want to set that person up for success. I want to set the committee up for success with that person so that they can be a little bit of the conduit. They know everyone in this room and everyone online. And when they hear, somebody says, hey, I'm headed out to Catamount to do such and such day, they can kind of have their spidey sense go off and be like, I really better call John and Amanda and make sure they know about that. Or did we schedule that? Are we staying on top of that? So it's for now through me. And then I hopefully hand off to somebody else because my brain's full, with other stuff, but.
Well, I think this is cool. So I can just say what I think I've heard from here is that what's out there now is what's going to be out there.
Yeah.
There's no outside the board. This is what we're working on. That the flags are there, they're going to stay there, but you won't be able to see them as much, and they come out if the tree dies. But otherwise they're going to be there. So that's theirs there. And we're going to work on the whole communications as far as when your students come out and that.
Yep.
I personally, I'm one of the people who wants an inside job. I don't want an outside job, but it's too cold out there. You people are crazy. But I, as a person who's not a big user of the forest, would still be interested because this is, as a Wilson resident, I own part of this forest and I would be interested. And I know that they cut down a whole bunch of trees and that was kind of controversial, but we're doing it for the good of the world. And so it would be interesting. Maybe something once or twice a year that would be like, this is what we're seeing, or this is what we did. It might just be interesting to read in the Observer or on the minutes or something, but, and then there, of course, there'll be people who would love to go tromping out there and see what they're looking at, what the flags are and what the trees are. So I think this is sort of a real, to me, just sort of a minimalistic, keeping people informed would be interesting to people. So I think people think that we made a sacrifice to cut all the trees down, and they'd be interested to know what we're learning from it, so.
Yeah, I'll back up what Gene said, like, if we could get like the nonprofit center could get like a twice a year, non-academic, but just, one page kind of, here's what's going on, like, we could put that in our newsletter and,
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, because those are people who see it, right?
Yeah, and the nonprofit center is in so many ways the face of the forest there. That's what, if people go there, they interact with staff and all that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people in town, like, they have no idea what's going on. They sort of know it's a town forest, but then they think like Catamount, the nonprofit, makes all the decisions. Like, they don't, that's fine. It's not their job to understand it, but the nonprofit being the face, I think if we could deliver some of that information, be like, hey, here's what's going on. And it could be working educational stuff too,
Right.
Camps, when the kids are out there, like, why are these flags here? Oh, it's about the forest. And they can tell the kids about what, what's going on. So I think there's a lot of potential benefits there if we can kind of get that communication going and just get sort of the non-academic, whatever we decide on, twice a year nugget from you. That would be great.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
I also think there's like some good local models for that, right? That we could look to of like, ooh, where's that being done really well? So I'm thinking of like Audubon, Vermont, and integrating some of the like forestry for the birds or like bird friendly maple practices into like their summer camps and their forest schools. And like, I'm not involved in that at all, but I know about it because my kids go to their programming, or they did before we came out to BC, and I would like learn about it through the kids. And so I'm really into what Alan just said, that like integration piece. And I would just, check the person that said that. Kim agreed in the minutes.
I
All right.
Got it.
I will also just share that we do have an explorers camp, and our mountain bike camp does also teach stewardship and land ethic. And when the flags were out, our campers were asking about them, and we didn't have the resources to answer their question. And I think that's where a lot of our frustrations came from, was just not being able to share these answers with people. We want to educate. We're psyched that there's research happening, and just we want to be able to share your work with others in an effective way. And I'm definitely gonna make all of our staff do the forestry talks this year. They did last year. Ethan came and did a presentation for our staff training. So it's not anything we're against. We just really want to be informed and a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, anybody that ever emails me gets a response within like 12 hours. So, I mean, so anybody, I mean, just reach out to me. I'm always happy to provide, help and, yeah. Nature Day Camp is why I do what I do, so I care a lot.
Wait, do you get to be outside?
Oh, but our undergrads do.
I can tell you that Tony is the professor that is always in his office. Like, I 100% vouch for that. If I'm like, oh shoot, I locked myself out of my office, or I have a question about something, I know Tony's in his office. He's always there.
Yeah,
I'll also-
brush fires in the computer.
I'll also share just from like an event planning back end, Catamounts got kind of 4 tiers of thresholds. So anything under 25 people, we consider normal use. And they can just kind of go out and do what they'd like. We'd love to know if people are coming
Yeah.
and doing things. And I know you mentioned students coming out and even measuring trees this year. If that's something that our campers could shadow or be a part of, I would love to do that. Knowing those dates would be super handy. At 50 people, that's when we consider it an event, and that's when we need a contract. UVM has formally declined to sign any of our event contracts, so we can't host events with UVM. I don't know if the same is true for the town, so I would encourage, if you have something over 50, go to them. I'm willing to open the doors that if it's in that 25 to 50, perhaps the outdoor center can manage, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and just kind of a specific example of the governance thing, like if someone wants to have, like, there wants to be a forestry event, does that go through the town? It's like it's a nonprofit. It's sort of ambiguous right now. So that's one of those things we need to define. And avoid any conflicts.
You can
Yeah,
get 50 people to come out and look at your flag.
I do want to point out that we are a little bit over our time. But we wanted to get to our timing now is the Outdoor Friendly Center update. We're kind of like, we're being ambiguously in our timing and our agenda items.
Thank you,
Kim,
Tony. That
do you
was
have
really
something
helpful.
else you were jumping in on?
Well, I was just gonna say, historically, I feel like one of the things we've done is the town has led events, right? And like hosted a speaker. And that has like enabled like bigger groups or something like that.
Have we ever had 50 people? That's like a town event. Again, with Jean.
I don't know. I can tell you that some of the early COVID online things that involved Tony's presenting research at the very beginning, there were so many people in the Zoom room that like it filled up. And when someone would leave, they wouldn't be able to get back in. But I think people were just at home and couldn't leave and were looking for.
Might have bird flu soon.
Yes. Right, there you go.
Time for that, Joe.
Yeah. All right, John, now it's your turn. Well, thank you again, Tony. That was excellent.
Don't feel you need to
Thanks,
say
Tony.
it.
Yeah,
You need
that was
to stop.
really, really helpful.
I did have a couple quick questions for you, Tony, but if it gets into governance and the sort of larger stuff, I don't want to get in the weeds right now. We're concerned a little bit about our own maintenance of the trails where these things are happening, and I think Hans brought up that we would likely come through and clip along the edge of the trail where some of these things are, and we don't want to do that without like full knowledge and permission from you guys to do that. And then the other piece is we have planned some reroutes in that area too that will likely impact areas that have been planted already. And I just want to put it out there, talk about it, see what that means. And we're not here to demand anything at all, but and in fact, we don't get to demand anything. We ask everybody for every kind of information possible. That's that's something just to keep in mind as we go.
Yeah, keep me posted, and obviously the clipping's fine, I mean, the trail was there before the tree was there, and so, but maybe the reroute, I'm open to as well, but maybe just like, let me show me where it is and we can figure out a way to. Yeah, we got a lot of trees out there, so I'm sure it's net impact is not gonna be a ton of trees, so, yeah, just let me know.
You could take out the one chestnut that could mean chestnut.
One resistant.
Whatever you don't touch this color flag.
Yes, that's right.
In terms of an update, we have winter this year, which has been an amazing thing for the center. We've had, 2 winters in a row that were really tough. And to see the place busy and people, out playing, and we're able to room regularly. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
And hold programs. I mean, we canceled most of our programs last winter. In clinics, because we just didn't have what we needed to do it. We did move to a model this year where we said we will hold an event regardless of what's on the ground, as long as the ground is frozen and hard. So we plan to do hikes and fat bike rides even if we didn't have snow. Thankfully, we haven't had to readjust too much. So that's been great. We're also deep in planning for not just in the near future, but for our overall Act 250 wetlands and stormwater permits for the larger update to the network, and then our building planning too, which has taken a lot of time and effort to do. And then fundraising has begun for those things too, so we're in that mode. And then next Monday we start summer camp sales. So
I was just gonna say summer camps, like, whoa.
I know, but that's how far out we have to be, and we did some real updates to our process this year that we're excited about. So that will hopefully add up to more efficiency on our back end and more kids in camp. So we're gonna try to maximize our spaces this year. We grew significantly in our first year with a new setup, and then we really are hoping to maximize it this year. In terms of the building planning update, we've held one public meeting and we've had our survey online for about a month, right?
So,
And had approximately 4 to 5 times as many people contribute to that as we did to our trail planning one. So I think people are, I think it's easier to connect to a building for people than to sort of, as you know, the lines on the map are hard.
We're hard to,
Yeah.
I looked at the
So-
layouts, like, this is a building, I knew what that looked like.
So that, I mean, I think that speaks to the connection people have to a new facility, and we're excited to keep moving forward on that. We have seen some drawings, and we're about to see some more. We've really been working closely with Black River and TCE to figure out what we really are hoping to get out of this. During this process, we also got a message from Catamount Trail Association asking whether they might have space in the new building. Maybe
Same
even space in our old building, because they are losing their space. And so that's something that we're considering now. It will be confusing.
Somebody has to change their name.
There's no way around that one, but I do think that we overlap in great ways, and that they will help us in the end with fundraising and making this to be a really vibrant space for a lot of people. So if that does work out, we'll be excited.
Are you hearing any concerns or questioning about putting a building in the forest?
So far, we have not had much negativity. We're not asking for a pool
You probably can't get a pool up there, people would be all over it.
I know, but it's not the right place.
Definitely
We're not allowed to do that type
Yeah.
of thing. I think we're trying to be modest, and we're trying to think of our neighbors. We're really trying to make it fit. in the space and not have it be something that, looks out of place. I think people are more excited about, what does it, what's its function and how, now we can't let people in our buildings. And so there is some like level of, oh my gosh, I can put my boots on. And not be in my car. So that tends to be where folks are focusing right now. We're happy to share the feedback directly with you all, and we can do that anytime.
But you have 2 more meetings?
We have 2 more meetings coming up.
Yeah, I want
Maybe
to put in
the
the
March-
plug for those
the March
because
meeting?
we had poor attendance at our first building planning meeting. It was Jim and Lucy McCullough and 1 person online, which is not what you're looking for. So we have an article in the Observer this week, but 2 more meetings coming up. We'd really like, we're gonna do some front porch forum posts, do some flyers, gonna put up around town, but we're looking for that input. I made up quotes for you in that article, John. I hope you like them.
I did probably said it at some point.
I think it's good though that you have a lot of survey responses because like in general, everyone that does survey research is like, what happened to my response rates? So good survey responses shows good engagement, even if people aren't showing up to the session. Maybe it's just that like it was a bad time of day. Like I think anytime there's like good survey response right now, I'm like, whoa, people care because it's just universally down. People have a lot of survey fatigue. So that's a good sign.
I agree, and I think the public meetings are super important, but I feel just as confident and good about the survey results. Because it does mean that people are caring and they may just not want to go to a meeting. And then we all love going to meetings at night, but we're weird that way.
There's an online version of the meeting too, so people don't have to leave their homes if they want to see it. And the next one in particular, I'm really gonna plug because Rebecca Roman from the Land Trust will be attending. And she's up, the Land Trust is a huge stakeholder in this, so we'd love to have an audience for her, not just 3 people.
The next meeting is on February 4th at the library across the road at 6 or 6:30.
6:30.
6:30.
So apologies a little bit, and I feel like I came in the middle of the movie, but who's gonna own this building? That
Now you're in my next part.
Okay.
Governance documents.
Speaking of which, as we are fundraising and as we are doing these permits and everything, we have brought up to the town who owns the building, and we're looking for a longer term lease for the center for doing all this artwork. So we don't have an answer yet, but
We'll hear more about this.
you can help us.
This is a future agenda item.
You know what, I just keep thinking of that sheep barn and that, in 100 years from now, my great granddaughter's gonna be saying like, we gotta take that building down or it cost us money.
I was in that sheet.
I was exploring and
No, but that is one of the fundamental things we're in our relations with the town, like, how is this gonna work? So that's a
yeah, it's a
Very
big question.
And if the select board wants us to come in and just sort of present our plans and ideas and what we hope, we're happy to do that anytime, to sort of direct that conversation and move along.
Okay. Matt, you and I might need to talk about what that looks like.
Talking to Eric already.
Yeah, I bet you are.
I mean, no specifics right now,
Yeah.
but there are ways for those
Okay.
arrangements to be set up. This isn't the first time something like this has been done, and the task is finding the right one that makes sense for the town and makes sense for the family center, but these things can be done.
like Ascutney Outdoors has done exactly this. They have a nonprofit center on town land. So it can be done. So we look forward to solving the problem, hopefully.
There's also like a lot of models of, I can't remember who I sent this to, but I sent an email about this at one point to somebody. There's a lot of models of like national parks that have concessions on them where like the concession owns the structures that are on the public land. Like as Matt said, it's surmountable figuring out how to do it.
And then our final update is an employee update. We have a great winter staff right now that we're really psyched about, and they are super flexible and able to pick up different jobs as needed. And then, in terms of summer employees, we've already reached out to them, and the vast majority of our summer folks are coming back. The only ones really that we're losing are the folks that are graduating and moving on.
Getting real jobs.
So, well, yeah, I mean, we talk about this pipeline that we're trying to create where we have campers who become,
Yeah,
coaches in
yeah,
training,
right.
and then those coaches in training become assistants, and while we have a few older coaches, it's really meant to be a job for, people in high school and college, and we have some really great CITs coming in this year too. So, we've really, we're excited that we have this great, staff culture now, and the folks are excited to be there and work. And, I think it makes a lot of difference for the experience that the kids have too, and that the parents have, and that there's a real sense of community to it.
Yeah, yeah. I went through the Girl Scout pipeline.
Yeah. Still wearing your green.
I'm still wearing my green. Thank you.
We should at some point talk about a formal pipeline to a Parks Rec and Tourism major.
I got to speak in front of Professor Kaufman's class recently, and
Yeah.
asked actually to speak more, and we sent him a list of potential internships too for folks to do. So we'd love to have that pipeline flowing.
Yeah, he's retiring soonish.
I'm gonna
I'll follow
jump
up
in though,
with you.
Kim. Matt has a hard stop in 4 minutes, and we have a few more things. Or are we set? With the Excel, did we wanna, with the purchasing policy and land management activities?
Yeah, let me just go through that, and I can probably squeeze till 7:10. Make it.
Okay, or we can talk really fast.
I've got a kid to pick up, who's gonna be standing at a dark ski area. with a
Cold.
light, wondering where I am. So,
They have a building now.
the other thing is, they do have a building. I don't know if they'll kick him out of it. They won't. It's
Didn't
not-
even lock it.
No.
They don't turn the lights off till 10.
The trail lights go out. Danielle and I were talking, it's incredibly dark. So we have a few other things on the agenda that wanted to touch on tonight. Purchasing policy and land management activities. We keep a perpetual link to the scheduled events on the force, which I looked into, and it hasn't been updated since we plugged events into it for June of last year. So there's really not much to talk about with that. And then, a little bit of just carry over future agenda items, and obviously adding the ongoing work to the sort of governance charter is gonna go on there. So that's what's left. The one I just want to touch on in terms of purchasing and land management activities that are done by the town. We had an email request from Terry Marin. Terry, you're still on, and you can probably speak to this, but Terry and some volunteers who work with her have taken on some of the bird habitat and bird box activities out there, and asked if the town could purchase, what are they, metal posts to
Metal
replace?
posts, for the birdhouse.
And Terry, you were thinking it was like about $100 worth.
10 posts, yeah.
Great. We can do that. I got a budget statement today. We have money in the budget allocated for, both trail maintenance broadly across the town, as well as some Catamount money. No problem with that, but I would look to educating, informing everybody on this committee about sort of this side of it, that, we do have some money we manage for a couple different town activities out there. A lot of it goes towards invasive species management. We also have some capital money that's available for bridge replacement for the family center, supporting the trails the family center uses. And it would be good if that is in more people's heads than just mine. And it's really honestly barely in mine. I have the budget statements and I know what the requests were for next year. But building a greater understanding amongst the committee of what the funding picture looks like, so that, when we have someone who's coming in on behalf of the town, like Terry, who says, hey, I need 10 posts for bird boxes. Can the town go do that? We don't all start from, well, do we have any money? Is that a priority activity out there, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to just
Well, I'm happy to talk with you or Shirley about that to get more of an understanding of the budgeting for the committee.
Yeah, and we can create a document just so the committee always kind of understands what's up with that. It's easy information to keep track of. It's not like we're purchasing things related to Catamount frequently at all.
Right.
But look to this committee for some guidance when there are some decisions to make of, do with whatever the town is gonna do out there, are we gonna do this? Are we gonna do that?
Well, we did spend quite a bit of time on the capital, which is in the budget,
Yes,
so more
Okay.
actually than we just settled on, so.
Really?
Shh, don't tell Eric. I think he made a mistake, but I didn't correct him. But yes,
So I
we
just
at least have
wanted
the
to-
money, if the budget passes, we do have the money in the budget for the bridges.
So I was just gonna say that Shirley was very helpful to Simon and I when we were working on a budget and understanding it. And she really was great at separating it all out from the capital improvement budget to the operating budget. So it made it a lot easier for us to both be on the same page.
Surely somebody that could help us? Is that what you're
She's the
saying?
finance director,
yeah,
Oh.
she helps me a great deal
Oh, I see.
and,
and I help her.
So, we
She's
can come
really
up with a sort of like a sub document of the overall department budget that just in plain English says this is what we have and this is
Yeah.
what we think it's for. And, the difference between capital and what comes out of our operating budget is capital is there out into the future. Operating goes away at the end of the fiscal year. And if you got budgeted for more, great. And if you didn't, then it's gone. So,
You know, Simon used to pay a lot of attention to the budget and sort of like educate us on the fly. I don't know if the replacement will do the same, or maybe you're asking us as a committee to take more ownership of that, because I don't feel like we had much ownership of it. We always looked at Simon and he would tell us what's up with the budget.
I think what we can do is much like the event schedule, we can create a document that the staff, myself or that new person is updating, and it's just a perpetual agenda item of like, what's up with that budget? And it can be a very short item here and also something you can access and see, whenever you want to, spend more time on the town website and hang out on your committee page. So we've gotten better over the years at sort of keeping information up to date and with some of the technology we have now, which is not rocket science, it's SharePoint, but we can create a document that everybody can go to whenever they want and that we can also go in and edit when we need to. And we can do all that without violating open meeting law. So, you can see us live update things, and then if you see something that you have a question about, you can call us or email us, say, hey, I saw you change this in the budget document, what's up with that? And I would want the next staff person to be able to slot into that way of working. We're doing a lot more of that with everybody. So
Cool.
we can keep it so that it doesn't take up a lot of space at the meeting and everybody stays informed.
Right, if it's just on the agenda, we see it and then we're all set.
You see it, and if anybody has questions, you can ask, and if you don't, great.
Do you need a motion to spend $100 on?
I would
Those-
like the consent of the assembled group to do that.
Could we have a motion to spend $100 for bird boxes?
Can I just ask a question? Is it the old poles are rusting and need replacing, or what's the?
Well, I can fill you in. So what happened was I got a lot of things through donations, and I got a bunch of poles, but they weren't really durable. When I pounded them in, they just kind of fell apart. The guy was very nice to offer them to us, but they're starting to rust, and they will eventually.
Okay. So replace, this is like, regular maintenance, replacement of poles.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Sure.
I move we allocate $100 to replace the poles on the bird boxes.
Is $100 really a good number, Terry? That gonna cover it?
Yeah, they're $10 a piece. So
Have 100, go with 150 and don't spend it all.
Sure, sounds
Friendly
good.
amendment,
Up to. Got it.
friendly amendment, Kim, that 150, up to 150?
I move we allocate 150 for poles
Okay.
to replace the rusty poles on the bird boxes.
Okay, and there was a second?
I second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Terrific.
Aye.
Nays?
See, I don't
No
see
nays.
where the government's, last meeting we spent $600, now we're spending 150.
It's very, that's
Mission.
Thank you.
I'll
Power's going in my head.
One quick thing that, in our planning process, we've also reviewed the archaeological review that it was done in 2021. It does speak to both logging during non-winter times and placement of new things in the ground, and that these should be reviewed. So we are gonna have to go through a much larger review for our work. As long as we're not changing anything, we're okay. But in all those places where we did suggest changes, those will have to be reviewed again. So if anything new is happening, we will likely have to go through, we should, according to what this document says, we should go through those reviews.
Yeah, any
They're all
town
existing.
activities. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I just said these are all existing, these
Yeah.
posts that are going, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes, they're existing, but they weren't checked before they went in the ground, right? There was no archaeological review before that happened.
There was no digging. It's just like the posts that you put in the ground for all your signs. It's literally just tapping in a post. So unless you get, reviewed for all the little posts that you put out, it's really the same thing. So.
On behalf of the town, we can ask for clarification from the state archaeological folks for that. We do that whenever we do anything. I know when we've asked to do land disturbance related to trail building, they have had us do review. They can give us some guidance on any, what those thresholds are, and we can get some feedback on that.
Yeah, I would be happy to go out with somebody from the state and go around to all the boxes and they can review them.
Yeah, another thing to clarify is I think that logging, John is correct about logging, and I think that there's a separate category for silviculture, where silviculture and agriculture are always exempt. So it would be good to just get like definitions about like when it's triggered and when it's not, and the specifics of it.
Do you want me to share the review so that?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
But I have Melinda, thankfully still here, but in a different role, who's been through this on some other town properties. So we
I think
we
this
know-
one, like my memory is they came in on Catamount also.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, you're scheduled for 2 weeks, and I'd like to get you back on schedule. So chairs and others, I'll put together a draft agenda we can work on and then get it out there. You'll probably have me again, just given the time frame.
You're
But
not gonna have a new person in 2 weeks from now?
no, but
Okay.
maybe 6 weeks from now. It always takes longer than you think, but we're out there. People are interested as far as I know, so we'll get someone good.
All right. So see you on the 4th and then the 13th.
On the 4th and the 13th, there you go.
Terrific.
I think Shaven's hand is up.
Oh, good catch.
I was not able to get on for the beginning of Tony's presentation, and I think once he started presenting, probably the fact I was in the waiting room didn't show, unfortunately. But the other thing I was wanting to do, I saw that on your future agenda items, you had an invasive plan on the future agenda items, and I would volunteer to participate in working on that. And just some background, in 2018, as part of Vermont Master Naturalist, I helped map the invasives there in the original invasive map. And then not this summer, but the previous 2 summers, in combination with Terry and with Ethan Tapper, I did invasive treatments because I have a license for herbicide use. I don't like spraying, and of course, that's what we had to do a lot of. I really prefer stump treating, but I would be happy to help with the plan if whoever's working on that could reach out to me. Thanks.
There's also money for that plan.
Yes.
Put in your invoice, Chapin.
I don't want money.
But you need supplies. Buckthorn blasters.
I actually pay for my own supplies. but yes.
Oh, stop it, Chapin. Thank you. I'm sorry that we missed you during
Yeah.
Tony's presentation.
That's okay. Was this was probably recorded, and so
Yes.
if I could get a link or if someone could help me find it, I would like to look at his presentation. So
It's on
thanks.
the website in a couple of days, right?
Yeah, I'll get it up on the website,
It's on
Chapin,
it's on
and send a link
YouTube,
around.
too.
Yeah, that's where we
You
put
just
it.
go to YouTube and like search for Catamount.
Yeah, and I'll ask Tony for his slides and publish a PDF of those too, if he's willing to share them, so that.
Yeah, I'd like
we've
to see
got them
Kim's,
archived.
I'd like to see Kim's in person too, so.
Yep. we
If
can
you don't
do
mind,
that.
Kim.
Sure, Kim,
Much
will be
appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaden.
Terrific,
All right, anything else?
We got it.
thank you.
Will we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. A motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All right.
All right,
I
all in
usually
favor.
say, whoever stands up first made the motion.
See,
Whoever
bye,
stood up
Kim.
second, seconded.
Yeah, as long as everybody stands up and walks out.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
All
Yeah,
right,
you might turn off the recording.
yep, you're gonna end the meeting.
Remind me.
Drew.
Drew.
Yeah,
Hans.
Hans. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.